begin the current Daf in the Masechta Rosh Hashanah Daf Tazayin. Begin in the tab of the Yomid. We continue with the next Mishnah in this Parak Rishon of Abba Rosh Hashanah, also discussing that of number 4 that happens during the year, and continue on the theme regarding judgment. She's corresponds to the Kal Zech and Cheskel turning to Daf Achim for joining us for today's Daf. Some things we're going to discuss in today's Daf are the 4 times each year that judgment is passed on this world. We have certain teachings regarding the shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah, where we do blow, we don't blow, regarding 3 groups of Yidden, that Tzadikim, Bein, Mersham, and how they fare in judgment on Rosh Hashanah. So the key terms of concept we can discuss in today's Daf are Korban HaOmer, which is on the second day of Pesach, is the barley offering of the new grain that is brought in. Whatever had taken root after that time is permitted to be eaten that year. Shtei Alechem is the first of the wheat grain from that year, which is brought in the Beis HaMikdash on Shavuos, which then permits the new grain to be brought in as a mincha in the Beis HaMikdash. So we begin the current Daf Tezayin. The Mishnah begins by Arba Parakim. And 4 times in the year, the world is judged, and it's for different things. The Pesach, it's al hatfu, on the grain, which actually brings a famous Gemara in Brachot David Ches. There's a certain chassid that he got in a fight with his wife over Rosh Hashanah, and he overheard the 2 spirits speaking with each other, and they said, I heard Machara Pargid, that whoever's going to plant in this season is going to work, whoever's not going to work. So it sounds like actually that on Rosh Hashanah, it actually was the Gzar Din regarding the grain, not on Pesach. So he says, maybe in Shemayim, they were just mentioning Rosh Hashanah, the Gzar Din happened on Pesach. Or maybe he holds like Yehuda, as we're going to see in the Gemara, it holds everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the Gzar Din was on Pesach, but really the everything is judged. There's the first part, there's a ksiva and the chesima, and therefore that's what was being done on Rosh Hashanah. But be that as it may, the time of our Mishnah says, on Pesach the grain is judged, but Saras and Shavuos al Peres Elon regarding the fruit of the tree. But Rosh Hashanah, the first of Tishrei, Kol Boy Olam Olam Lefanov K'nei Marayin. We all know this terminology, that all those who pass through this world, they pass in front of Hashem like B'nei Marayin, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly on Daf Ches, what does B'nei Marayin mean? Shenem, like it says the pasuk in Tehillim, Hayotzi Yachad Libam, he forms together their hearts. Hamevin al Kol Masayim, that he understands to all their actions, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly what is this pasuk illustrating. That you see from here that everyone gets judged as B'nei Marayin in front of Hashem Rosh Hashanah. And finally, the 4th judgment is B'chag during Alamayim. On Sukkot is the judgment regarding the water. So the Gemara explains, when you tell me that on Pesach there's a judgment on the grain, Sahei Tvu, which grain? Meaning, as the Gemara explains, Pesach is the middle of the season. Ilim Hatvu de Kaima. If you're going to tell me it's the grain that's standing right now and attached to the ground and it's ready to be harvested, because as we know, Shavuos is called Chag HaKatzah. So that means Pesach time, the grain is in its stalks standing. So if you're going to tell me it's regarding the standing stalks, that's when the judgment is on the grain, well then Kolhani Harfate, then all the different things that happen. The other law that have passed over this grain up until this point, same as Isdom. When was that judged? Because you tell me grain is only judged by Pesach, these stuff, what happened all the way up until now? Oh, Ella, what are you going to tell me? Tvudim is data. No. Meaning, on Pesach, we actually judge the grain that's going to be planted in Mar Cheshvan, because now Pesach is before that time. It's a Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, El, Tishrei, Cheshvan. So whatever's going to be done from Cheshvan on till Pesach of the next year, that gets qualified that gets judged on Pesach. So the Gemara says, remember the Chadin and Mistana? Is that to say that their judgment on the grain happens only one time, which is before it's planted up until the next year's Pesach? But Tanya learned the price that actually there's 2 times that the grain gets judged. Tavua shiur b'keri. Regarding grain, that some happenstance happens to it. For example, let's say hail, or let's say wind blast, or something beyond one's control, which on the side of the Gemara they bring from the Aruch, Keri is like something that happens b'dei Shemayim, like a Mikri Laila. Einus as by human force. So either as it may, if something happens to a person's grain beyond his control, so if it happens Kodim HaPesach, before Pesach, Nedainis L'Sha'ava, it's qualified from before it's planted, meaning because the judgment was obviously on Pesach of last year. La'achar Pesach, when the stalks are almost finished, if something happens to it after Pesach, then the Dainis Lahaba. Then it gets qualified from the coming year, meaning from the Pesach that you had after it was planted, which was right before this end of the season. Similarly, regarding Adam, a person, shiur beikeri oinus, of something that happens b'dei Shemaim or b'dei Adam to the person, if it's Kodim Yom Kippurim, if it's for Yom Kippurim, Nidin L'Sha'ava, then it's obviously from last year's Yom Kippurim there's the Kippurim. La'achar Yom Kippurim happens after Yom Kippurim, Nidin L'Haba, which means to say from the Yom Kippurim that just happened recently from this coming year. But one thing we see is that the grain is not just one time being judged, whether at the end of its planting or before it was ever planted. It seems to be that because the grain passes over a Pesach, so it could either be from last year's Pesach or from the most recent Pesach. So rather, Amar Rabbi says, you're right, Shema Meno, could infer from this that Shrei Dinim is done. There's actually two judgments that we have for grain. Yes, it's always Pesach, but you can have before it's planted, what's going to happen up until when it's standing grain. And then you have close to the time when it's harvested, which is right after Pesach. That also has a judgment, because anytime you pass Pesach, you're passing a judgment. So essentially every grain is going to have two judgments, because it's planted after a Pesach, and then it passes over another Pesach by when it's right before the time when it's about to be harvested. So it's going to be judged two times, because it's going to be passing two Pesachs. Now, based on this, Amabai actually says, if someone sees that the slow growing vegetation is being successful, like for example wheat and spelt, which is planted in Macheshvan. The reason why it's planted so early is because it takes a long time for it to mature. Let's say he sees that it's doing very well, this plant. So liktim alizar charfa, so you should quickly go ahead and plant the quick growing vegetation, which is barley that grows very quickly. And that's why they planted later on in the season, the Shvat Nada. Now, once you see that the slow one, that you already see it's starting to look good, obviously that means say your grain was judged well the last year's Pesach, so quickly go ahead and plant something else to chaperein, because the adamati lemadainya, because up until it's going to be judged the next Pesach, kadam salik, you would have already beaten the clock, you already grew a little bit, and it's not going to be quick to get ruined. So chaperein, take a look, see if this one's doing well, go ahead and jump in and go ahead and plant something else that you can chaperein on that. Now the Gemara says, our Mishnah seems to be difficult because we don't know who the Tana is. Mani Masnin, who's the Tana by Mishnah? Lo Yemeya, V'lo Rabbi Yehuda, V'lo Rabbi Yosi, V'lo Rabbi Nasan. We're going to quote a brayso with four different opinions, and our Mishnah seems to be like not like any one of them regarding how many times a year is their judgment. The Tana learned the brayso. The first Tana says, Hakol Nidonim b'Rosh Hashanah. Everyone gets judged on Rosh Hashanah, meaning everything in the world. V'gzar din shalahem, and their decree, the verdict is handed down, is nechtem b'Yom Kippurim, is sealed in Kippurim d'Brit Meah. So it doesn't make difference, grain, fruits of the tree, human beings, water, everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the gzar din is Yom Kippurim. Obviously not like our Mishnah. He says, Hakol nidan b'Rosh Hashanah, everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but this is where he says differently, v'gzar din shalam nechtem kol echad v'echad b'zman, but the chasima, each one, the seal is on different times of the year. The Pesach is al Atavur, Ba'atzeres al Peres Elon, Bechag Midoin al Mayim, Adam, regarding a person, Nidim Rosh Hashanah, he's judge Rosh Hashanah, Gzardin Shalai Nechtem Yom Kippurim, his Gzardin, the decree, the verdict is sealed on Yom Kippurim. Sorry, that's not like our Mishnah also, because our Mishnah said that the whole din itself is not on Rosh Hashanah, it's on these different seasons. Third time, Rabbi Yisrael, he says, so he's definitely not like our Mishnah. He says the person judged every single day. Shlomo says the pasuk in Iyov, but tifkedenu levikarim, that you're going to check him out in the mornings. Every single morning, a person gets judged for that day. He says, person actually gets judged every single moment. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that same pasuk, that in the moments that you're going to check him out. So who's the Tana of Mishnah? It's not every moment. It's not every day. It's not on the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, and it's not Rosh Hashanah and then the Gizar and then Gizar Din on Yom Kippurim. Our Mishnah says there's four different Dinei Torah throughout the year. It says we're going to say Rabbi Yehuda. Wait, maybe the Tana of Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. How so? Because when we learn the Mishnah that it's in 4 times of the year, Gizar Din, Rabbi Yehuda could be the Tana of Mishnah. Yes, everyone's kesiva, everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but the seal, the Gemar Din, is on 4 different times of the year. And that's what our Mishnah is saying. It says Gemara, you can't say that, because if that's the case, Kashi Adam, then you have a difficulty regarding the human being. Because our Mishnah said that the human being is judged Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbi Huda, he says that it's on Yom Kippurim. Meaning, if you're telling me the Tana of our Mishnah is talking about the Gemar Din, then why is our Mishnah saying that the Adam is judged, which means the Gemar Din on Rosh Hashanah? It's not true. The Gemar Din is on Yom Kippurim. Because Rabbi Huda was saying everything is judged Rosh Hashanah, then the Gemar Din is on different times of the year. For the water on Sukkot, for the Peres Elon on Shavuos. But then why'd you say, he says the Gemar Din is on Yom Kippurim, so why is, if our Mishnah is talking about Gemar Din, and that's why it's all these different times, then Adam is not Rosh Hashanah, then Gemar Din is on Yom Kippurim. Why is he saying Rosh Hashanah? So Rabbi says, Hi, Tana de Rabbi Shloimy. The Tana of Mishnah is a different Tana, not one of these four. It's that as we taught in the Brisa of Shiur Rabbi Shloimy. The Tana of Rabbi Shloimy says exactly like our Mishnah. 4 times a year a person is judged. The Pesach, al Tfu, and Pesach you get judged regarding the grain. Teres and Shavuos al Peresim regarding the fruit of the tree. Chag and Sukkot and Donamayim you get judged on the water. Adam nidim Rosh Hashanah, a person gets judged on Rosh Hashanah. And the verdict is sealed on Yom Kippur. And therefore, when we learned in the Mishnah, it's 4 times a year. You're right, it's not Tchilas Din, not like we thought to say for Rabbi Yehuda. It's on the beginning of the judgment. But actually, the Gzar Din of the person is sealed on Yom Kippur. But our Mishnah is talking about, like the Tana Rabbi Shmuel, on the actual Din itself, is on these 4 times of the year. Now, Amar Rav Chizek, in explaining 2 of the opinions we mentioned in the Brisa, how many of when a person is judged. So Rav Chizek says, my time Rabbi Yisi. Rabbi Yisi said a person is judged every single day. So what's the reason Rabbi Yisi? What's his source? So Gemara says, well, to become a taimei, like he said his reasoning. He said it's a pasuk. You're going to check him in the mornings. What are you asking? He says, no, I mean, this is what we're saying. We had a difficulty like this. My time, why didn't Rabbi Yisi say like the next Tana? Rabbi Nassan said that you get judged every single moment. Why didn't he say like them? Because he held that those words in the pasuk of l'regoim tivchonenu, that every moment you are beichen him. The word beichen doesn't mean a din. It just means a yun ba'almihi. It just means Hashem is checking into the person's actions. But it doesn't mean there's actual judgment. So you can't say his Rosh Hashanah is b'chol rega. So that's why we're asking Rabbi Yisi too. What do you mean? Pekidanami yun ba'almihi. His words, that his source of the pasuk, that it says about tivkedenu lebegadim, that doesn't mean a judgment. It doesn't mean it's just checking into the person. That's why we're asking on him. You don't like the mandamo says every single moment, so then don't say every single day either. So the Gemara says you're right. It's a good question. Elam Rav Chizr says, time to Rabbi Yisi Mahacha. You're right. The reason Rabbi Yisi is actually from a different pasuk. It's a pasuk in Malachim Aleph. Pasuk says, "Lasas mishpat avdoi." The pasuk there starts off by saying, "Let my words be in supplication in front of you, Hashem, to be close to Hashem, our God, day and night." Which is lasas mishpat avdoi, to do the judgment of his slave, of his servant, or mishpat am Yisrael, and the judgment of his people, the Jewish people. Devar yoim b'yoimai, the thing of everything day by its day, and the Tumah mishpat. So you see that mishpat, the judgment, is every single day. And it's famous from the Baal Shem. What does it mean that a person gets judged every single day? It's a famous ma'aseh. The Baal Shem was walking with his talmidim, and he saw Yankel Navasi today. Says, "Nu Yankel, how it thinks?" He says, "How it thinks? Look at me. I'm an old man. I have to schlep water. What is that? At my age, I have to be schlepping. You know what it takes? You know how much money I get already? What do I really get already? This is a life." Next day, again, the Baal Shem sees the Yankel Vasveg. He says, "Nu Yankel, how you doing? How am I doing? Baruch Hashem, look at me. I'm an old man. I could schlep. I have koyach, ma'isa. I make enough to cover." Baal Shem says, "Oh, doesn't demand the other need the every single day you get judged. It could be the same thing, and you could be happy and you could be unhappy. A person every single day gets judged, and as you see, it could change from day to day. But Al Kapanim, this is his new pasuk, Devar Yem B'Yayma, that you see every single day is a mishpat. Now, that same pasuk, the Gemara brings again from Amram Chizda, but a different Joshua. It says, Melech v'tzibra, we have a king and the public, Melech nechnes tchil ladin, the king goes into judgment first. Shemak says in the pasuk that we just brought, it says, Last mishpat abdoi, to do the judgment of his servant, and then, mishpat am Yisrael, the judgment of his people, the Jewish people. See, Melech comes first, which that was the Evid that was referring to David HaMelech. Says Gemara, my time, why does the king go first? Two pshatim, as we had this on the previous daf. Ibaisim, if you want, you could say because lav orich avra lameisa malkavra. It's not appropriate for the king to wait there outside. Ibaisim, if you want, you could say before all the anger boils up, whatever that means metaphorically, but it means to say that the charein av is because of all the sins. Let him go first, and then the people come after that. Now, going back to this machlekes that we said about when is a person judged, on his meisim. Is it every single day, every single moment? Is it once a year, like we have on Rosh Hashanah? Some of these says, Kaman Matzlina, based on this, according to whom do we daven ha'idna now? Akatsiri, which means sick people, Vamari, which means Tamil Chacham, who are very weak. According to whom is it that we daven all the time? Says the Gemara, Kaman, who's it like? It's Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi says a person gets judged every single day. Okay, so that makes sense why you would daven to merit a person that it shouldn't be punished by death, because if it's like the Rabbanan that says we get judged on Rosh Hashanah, well, what's the point of davening? The person was already the penalty was handed down already. There's no point davening for a sick person. If we daven for sick people, obviously we hold like Mandama, so you could daven. Let the judgment tomorrow be differently. Because if you're going on Rabbanan, there's no point in davening. Now, Taisus actually has interesting Taisus. He says that, but what do you mean? Well, according to Rabbanan, you think we don't have Nusach Tefillah B'Rafeinu? And Berchas Hashanim and Baruch Aleinu. What does that mean? According to Rabban, why taka do we daven Shmoneh Esrei? Additionally, he says Rabbi Yehuda himself, who says over here in our Gemara that a person gets judged Rosh Hashanah and is Gizar Dan Yom Kippurim, which most people think along those lines, like that Manda Amar. In the first parak of Shabbos, he says if someone goes to Mevaka Chayla, he says Hamokim Merachim Alechem Al Chayla Am Yisrael. What are you davening for? It's too late. Your decree handed down. So Rabbi Tam says very interesting differentiation. Says not to become sick. Most definitely you cannot daven, only according to Rabbi Yosi. Because that Gizar Din was handed down that you're going to get sick that year. There's no point, you can't daven, you won't get sick. But to daven the person get healed, that you can daven according to everyone, because as Rabbi Tam says, when he's going to get sick was decreed. When is he going to get healed wasn't decreed. So therefore you could daven for the person to get better. Additionally, Taisa says that this that we say, Berchas Hashanim, could also be, when we daven Baruch Aleinu, it could be that as the Gemara says on Daf Yomi Beis, that there's a certain amount of rain that's going to come, and that was a Gizar Din. But when and how it's going to come wasn't necessarily decreed, and that you could change by davening. Additionally, another Pshat Taisa says is that Tfil Dura Mashani, when you daven with the Tzibur, you daven Shmoneh Esrei, you say Baruch Aleinu in the Lashon Rabbim, that the Gizar Din could be Nikra, as the Gemara is going to say on the next Daf. And that's how you can explain the Gemara in Shabbos also. When you come to Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's the Gizar Din of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, you come to visit a sick person, it's similar to Tfilas Rabbim because you say B'Seich Shar Choyli Yisrael. So you're saying it as a Tfilas Rabbim. So Tfilas Rabbim could be Koyrei of the Gizar Din, and that's why we daven today. Even according to those who says no point in davening, the Gizar was already there. Again, either it's different between becoming sick and getting healed, or Tfilas Rabbim is different. But that's one shot that it could only be according to Rabbi Yosi. But then the Gemara says actually a different shot, as we just alluded to. People say if you want to say Lom K'Rabbana. That really this that we daven for sick people, it's even like the Rabbana who the din was already Rosh Hashanah Kippurim, but because Rabbi Yitzchak he says Yofet Sakal Adam, it's always good for a person to scream Ben Koyim Gizar Din, Ben La'ach Gizar Din, whether it's before the decree was handed down, whether it was after the Gizar was handed down. So you're right, there's a Gizar Din, but the Tza'aka, the Tefillah could be Koreya, the Gizar Din. Now continuing on this theme of our Mishnah that we said that the world is judged in 4 times a year for 4 different things. The time we learned the Brisa, that there's actually korbanos that or avodah as it's called, that correlate to these 4 seasons. I'm going to read the Mishnah said, not on Torah. Why did the Torah say, if you oime b'Pesach? Why? Why does Hashem say bring the barley offering on the 2nd day of Pesach? I'll tell you why. This is related to the halacha of our Mishnah. Mishnah Pesach is man tevuhu because Pesach is a time when the grain gets judged, as we said in the Mishnah. So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is really the secret of the Bali Avodah. Every Yom Tov they come and they look at the mitzvahs hayom and they tell you why the mitzvah hayom is unique for the skulas hazman. And that's what our Gemara is telling you similarly over here. Because Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Hevi lo fana arma b'Pesach. Bring in front of me the barley offering of Pesach. Kedei shetisbarach lechem tevuah shabbos. So that your grain in the field should be blessed. Because this is the time when the world is being judged for this. So Hashem says, I'm going to give you an avodah that correlates to this, which is the korban omer. So too, why does Torah say, bring these 2 loaves of the new wheat grain on Shavuos? So the reason is, because on Shavuos is the time when the fruits of the tree get judged. So my Kadosh Baruch Hu says, bring in front of me these 2 loaves on Shavuos, so that the fruits of the tree should be blessed. Now the question is, Shtei HaLechem is made out of wheat. Why would that be the korban you would bring for the Peres Elon? So Rashi says because the Shtei HaLechem qualifies, it's meratz on the Peres Elon, because when you bring the Shtei HaLechem, that permits the bikurim, which are the first, primarily, the fruits of the tree, that you cannot bring bikurim before Shavuos. Like it says in Shemot Lamadam, bikur k'tzir chitim. So therefore, the Shtei Alechem, which is what permits the Bikurim, would qualify for a Ritzui for the Perisilim, because that's when you can start bringing the Bikurim, which are the fruits of the tree. Or, Rashi has another pshat, Rabbi Yehuda, who says this, is Lishitasai, as is brought in Sanhedrin of Ayin and Aleph, that he says that the tree, quote unquote, that Rabbi Rishon ate from was a chita. So he calls chita as an eitz, that was the eitz hadas, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda could say that it's maratza on Perisilim because he considers a wheat stalk as an eitz. Now, the third one, Nema Amr Torah Nischu Mayim B'Chag. Why did the Torah say that you should pour water libations on Sukkot on the Mizbech? Same idea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Nischu Lefonei Mayim B'Chag. Pour in front of me water on Sukkot, that you should have the blessings of the rains of the year. And so too, V'Amr Lefonei Rosh Hashanah. Say in front of me Rosh Hashanah, which was the fourth parak of din that we said in our Mishnah. On Rosh Hashanah, you say Malchias, kingship, Zechranias, the pasuk of remembrances, b'shayfaris, and the pasuk of sharas, which you have 3 sets, each one having 10 psukim. Why do we mention these 3 ideas? So Malchias, the kingship is Kadesh Tamluchuni Alechem, so that you should make me king over you. Zechranias, the pasuk of remembrances, Kadesh Yal Zechraniachem Lefan L'Tevah, that your remembrance should come in front of me in a good state. And then what is it going to be done with? Is b'shayfa, is through the shayfa. And you probably heard like 13,000 pshat when it comes to Yom Ram, but this is where the Gemara is, that these are the 3 different ideas that are integral, and therefore we say the psukim of these 3 different ideas on the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, which is that whole davening, as you see, has these 3 ideas. Now, Amar Bavo, continuing on these teachings of Rosh Hashanah, why do we blow? Teresa points out that although it's machlokes, some say others, but we rule that it should be done with the shofar of a ram. Why is that? So my Kadosh Baruch Hu, he says, "Tikul lefanei b'shofar shalayil," blow in front of me with a shofar of a ram, kadesh esker lechem akedas Yitzchak and Avram, like we had this last week's parasha. So I should remember for you the binding of Yitzchak, the son of Avram, which what happened is that they had an aisle that took the place of Yitzchak, and that reminds Hashem of the Akedah. I'm going to consider it as if you're binding yourselves in front of me, meaning as if you're doing the Akedah. That reminds Hashem, so to speak, of when you use the horn of the ram as the shofar. Another teaching again from Amr of Yitzchak, he says, why do you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? So why do you blow the shofar? The Torah says to blow the shofar. Ella lama marin. Why do you blow the trua? Marin, says the Gemara. Why do you blow a trua? Rachmana Torah says meyikar zichron and trua. It should be remembrance of a trua blast. So Ella says the Gemara. No, the question was lama teikin marin kishen geishlim. Why do you blow tkiya and trua? What's called the tkiya is the yeshiva, the ones that when they're sitting, so to speak, which we stand, but and as we continue on the base, but teikin marin kishen namdin. And why do we call the tkiyas damida, which is by the Shmoyne Esrei, by the Tzibur? Why do we blow Tkiya and Trua again when they're standing? That was the question. Says the Gemara, to confuse the Satan, that he shouldn't prosecute, because Rashi says when he hears the Jewish people so much endear themselves to the mitzvahs, so he can't speak because he's trying to prosecute, and the Jewish people are showing how dear it is to them. Taisus, he brings from the Aruch, as brought in Yerushalmi, a well-known pasuk that's said by a Hesped, Bila Hamavas Lo Netzach. It says, V'hoi Bayimahu Yitakah B'Shofar Gadol. What's on that day is going to be the great shofar blast. So when the Satan hears the shofar blast one time, so he gets afraid, but not so afraid. And he hears it the second time, he says, "Oh, this is most definitely the shofar that's going to be blown, the shofar gadol." And the time has come that Yibala Hamavis Lanetzach, the Satan is going to go ahead and he's wiped out now. So he gets confused and he doesn't get an opportunity to prosecute. That's why we blow it once by the first set and then again another set. Which Taisa actually asks is, why isn't that Issa Bal Taisa? And he says, significant to say because once you already fulfilled it, it's already Shaloi Bezmanai. And the Issa Bal Taisa was only Bezman of the mitzvah. Now it's already Shaloi Bezmanai. Taisa is not true. He says that we find Mavichas Kanim that you can add on, even though you already did it already. So Taisa says an interesting chiddush. He says Bal Taisa is not doing one mitzvah 2 times. For example, if a kohen goes and benches that tzibur, and then he goes another time, well, let's say you take a lulav and you take another time, you blow it and you blow it another time, whatever it is, doing one mitzvah 2 times is not Bal Taisa. So therefore, it's not Bal Taisa to do more tkiyas. You're doing the mitzvah, and you're doing the mitzvah again, you're doing the mitzvah again, so therefore it's not a problem about Bal Taisa. But again, that's why we do 2 sets, because we want to confuse the sat. Now we do more than that, but that's the primary sets that we do. Another teaching by Rabbi Yitzchak, a series of teachings by Rabbi Yitzchak on this theme, Any year that you don't blow the shofar in the beginning of the year, which Taisus brings from the halachas gedolos, is not because it was on Shabbos, because obviously for Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos not going to blow the shofar. Rather, some type of illness happened that they weren't able to blow the shofar. So then marin lo b'seifa. Then bad happens at the end, which marin is also interesting. The word trua, but it's bad for the Jewish people at the end. My time, what's the reason? Because like we just said, arvev satan, because the satan wasn't confounded. He's not able to prosecute because the shofar blast, whatever the reason is, because they think the shofar of the Tchis HaMesim, or because the shofar of the Jews love the mitzvahs, but there was no shofar blast, and he's able to prosecute, so therefore Chas Shalom, it's a bad year. Another teaching, Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, Kol Shana Shadasha B'Tchilasa. Any year that the Jewish people make themselves as if they're poor in Rosh Hashanah, what does that mean? It's to talk in supplication and prayer, like a pasuk says in Mishlei, Tachanunim Yidaber Rosh. A poor person speaks with supplication, he's begging, but like Tais says literally, it says if the Jewish people are actually poor, so that their hearts are broken and they're beseeching mercy from heaven, so then Misasheres B'Seifer, then it's a wealthy year at the end. It's not like it says the pasuk in the bottom. It says Meireshus Hashanah v'ad Achar Shana, which simply the pasuk is telling you that Hashem's eyes are on the world from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. But actually, the word Meireshus over there is spelled without an aleph. Meiroshes ksiv, spelled from Rosh, which means poor. V'ad Achar then says till the end. Soifish Yesh L'Achar means the end that has an Achar, that there is an end, meaning that there's a good ending to the story, happily ever after, that there's wealth at the end of the year. Another teaching for Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, in Donnas Adam, we don't judge a person, meaning in Shemayim, Elfi Ma'asav Shalei Shah, only according to his actions of that moment, meaning even if he's ultimately going to be wicked at a later point in time, right now he's a tzaddik, so then they judge him as a tzaddik. Shnamai says the pasuk in Bereshis, which we also just had in this past week's parasha, Kisham Elikim L'Kol Anar, because God heard the voice of the youth, Ba'asher Hu Sham, which he is in that moment, which the Medrash Rabbah Bereshis brings that Malach Hashem said in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, someone that his sons are going to end up killing your sons with thirst. You're going to go ahead and make a well of water for him? It said in the pasuk in Yeshaya that when the Jewish people were traveling, that they brought to them, they were thirsty, and they brought to them, so to speak, water. And they actually, for the Jews, when they were in exile, they brought them salty things, and then they brought them flasks where they were so thirsty, and they brought them these flasks, and they thought there was water inside, and they take it, it was empty, and they died. So this is the grandchildren of Yishmael, and you're going to let them live? So Hashem said to them, at this moment, is Yishmael a tzaddik or is he Rosh? They said he's a tzaddik. So he said the famous words of the pasuk about Shir Husham, I'm not going to judge our Gersa Rashi as a oilam, some say the word is ha'adam, I'm only going to judge the person in his moment right now. If right now he's righteous, then he gets the judgment of being righteous. Another teaching for Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, he says that Gimel Devar Maskin Nabanestav Shalatim, there's three things that recall the sins of a person. What are these three things? Kir Natui, if there's a slanty wall and a person passes beneath it, that recalls the person's sins. Because they say, this person is worthy of having a miracle done for him. Like in other words, someone does a dangerous sport, someone does something that's like as if he's relying on to be saved, and therefore they start checking in, is he really so worthy for this? And so too the Ian Tefillah, which Rashi brings, even Tefillah means to say that if he relies on his prayer and he's confident that he's going to be heard for what he's davening, and he's pressing along and to have focus, because I know my Tefillah is going to be answered. Because initially Taisus wants to bring from Rabbi Tam that even Tefillah means, like the Gemara in Baba Basra brings, that there's three things that a person is not saved from every single day, which a person stumbles on. And one of them is Iyun Tefillah, which means that person does not have kavanah so much when he's davening. Iyun Tefillah means he's not able to focus. Like Tess brings from the Yishalmi, a very interesting, humorous way of saying it. Ramana says, he says, I'm very thankful for my head. Why? Because when I reach Maidim, it bows down by itself. You know, so that it's like people don't really think anymore, and everything is just on automatic. So initially, that's what Taisa wants to say, that's what it means. Even Tefillah, the Taisa says no, it can't be, and rather even Tefillah, he says like Rashi, because all these three things are basically the same theme. It's basically about a person so confident, he's full of himself. He thinks that he's so good, so that when he's walking under a slanty wall, it won't fall on him. And that I'm going to daven, I'm going to get what I'm asking for is going to happen, and techelis m'meshecha. It's not true. Why are you so confident you think that your tefillahs are going to be answered? And then when they start checking, who does this guy think he is? That he's an ed daven, and suddenly the whole world has to turn upside down? And the third thing is the same thing also. If someone is handing over judgment on his friend, which he's like as the parsha that we're going to have this week's parsha, that Sarah tells Avram, Yishber Hashem beini beinecha, that let Hashem judge between me and you. They as if they say on Shemayim, what this person is fit, and another person should be punished because of this mensch. He says, he says, a person deserves who knows what. And Shemayim, they want to know who's this person that feels that he's worthy, that someone else should be punished because of him. It's the same idea. All these three things are the same thing. That is maskir nabanaisa. Yeah. Let's see, Taka, if you're so worthy, that all these three things should be done for you. Where, as the Gemara brings, the Amr and the Gir says, Chanan, whoever is informing on the fellow Jew, who he actually gets punished first. Shemek says the pasuk in this week's parasha, Bereshis, by Thomas Sarah al Avram, Sarah says to Avram, Chamasi alechem, my anger is on you. Uksiv, and it says, Vayav Avram, Lisper Lasod of Kais. I mean, that's actually, but this coming, this is this week's parasha. And Chaye Sarah, that Sarai was upset at him beforehand, not this week's parasha. That was when, when she doesn't have a child, I gave my maidservant to you, and she's looking down at me. She has a child, I don't have a child, but she was moisedin on Avram, like I'm all upset at you. And guess what happens? It says in this week's parasha, Sarah, that who buried who? Avram buried Sarah. You get the person who's moisedin chaber gets punished first. He came to eulogize and to cry over her. Another teaching from Amr Yitzchak, he says, Dal Dvar Mekarim Gizar Dina Shalatim. There's four things that tear up the decree of a person. Elohim, and they are tzedakah, charity, tza'aka, screaming, which is davening, and shina Hashem, changing one's name, v'shina Maisa, and changing one's actions, meaning he repents from his wicked ways. And the Gemara brings the source for all of these. Tzedakah, charity, is like says Bati Mishlei, with tzedakah tasim mavas. The charity saves from death. Tza'aka, screaming is the like says the person until be tza'akol Hashem b'tza'alahem, that they scream at Hashem in the constraints for them. And from the straits, he removes them. So you see that tza'aka helps tear up the Gizar Din. Shina Hashem, to say, what do we find changing in the name? Like it says, Sarai ishtecha, Hashem says to Avram, your wife Sarai, like tikra shema Sarai, don't call her anymore Sarai, ki Sarah shema, because her name is Sarah. What does it say? Now bless her, I also give to you from her a son. So you see that by changing the name from Sarai to Sarah, she merited ripping up her old Gizar Din not to have a child. China Maisa, changing of one's action, looks like it says in Sefer Yainam, it says that God saw their actions, meaning that they repented. Also that God, he changed from what he had planned on doing to them, and he didn't do because of the Shina Maisa of the people of Nineveh. Now the Yeshem, some say another thing. Av Shina Makom, also changing one's place, one's location. It says the pasuk by Yom Avram last week's parasha, the previous parasha. Hashem said to Avram, Lech lecha ma'artzecha, go to you from your land. And what is it, Bahada? What does it say then? He changed his location, and it says that Eschel Gadol, and make you into a great nation. So you see, Shina Makom is also to encourage Gizar Din Shel Adam. The other man who didn't say Shina Makom, he says, no, who's the Eretz Yisrael who dahanile? It wasn't the fact that he just changed location from Chavan from Ukazim to going to Eretz Yisrael. Because of Eretz Yisrael, that specific location, and not just because of Shina Makom that made him into have this bracha of Eschel Gadol. Another teacher, Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, a person has to receive the countenance of his teacher. He has to come greet him on the regel on the Yom Tov. Somebody says the pasuk Melachim Beis says, and this we had last week's Haftarah with the Isha Shanamis. Why are you going today to the great man, to Elisha? It's not Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, it's not Shabbos. It was Geis Dahain. It's special to him, but her son, he needed to go. Not Machab, the inference is the B'Chodesh Shabbos, he but on Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos, you are supposed to go ahead and greet the Rabbi. Another teaching, Rabbi Yitzchak, says, a person has to purify himself when it comes to Yom Tov. Mikveh. Shemlik says, when the blossom likes to go, and to the dead carcasses they shouldn't touch, which that pasuk is talking by Yom Tovim, as the Gemara explains later on the Brisa, as the Gemara brings right now. Time goes on the Brisa. It says, when the blossom likes to go, that the dead carcass you shouldn't touch. Now, Yachal you Yisrael Mazarin Al Magid Abel. You would think based on this pasuk that a regular Jew is forewarned not to touch a dead animal. But Tamalima, that it says in the pasuk Emra Lekam Aaron, it says when it talks about the laws of not becoming Tamei, it says speak to the Kahanim, the sons of Aaron, which tells us Bnei Aaron Mazarim, only the Kahanim are prescribed. Bnei Yisrael in Mazarim, but a regular Jew is not forewarned. Now for Halim from Kavachemer, so it's a Kavachemer. Umad Tumah Chamura, if regarding whether it says in Parashas Emor, which is severe level Tumah, that of mess. that Kahanim Mazar and only Kahanim are for one, then not supposed to come Tamei. Then I'll go in the cemetery. Yisrael in Mazar, but the regular Yisrael is not for one. So Tama Kala, so a lesser Tama, which is that of an Avela, like Koshkin, isn't it? All the more so that Yisrael is not forewarned. So what does the pasuk mean when it's when the warning Klal Yisrael not to touch in Avela? That is b'regel. That's in the Yom Tiv, and the Yom Tiv is a higher level. A person is not supposed to become tamei. Now going back to the halacha of the theme of our Mishnah of regarding the judgment of Rosh Hashanah, so well-known Gemara, it says Shleisha Svarim, which many people don't know the way Rashi translates. There's 3 books which Rashi says these are not what as many people think the books that we're writing in. No, these are the Sifri Zikaron. These are the books that recall the actions of the creations, meaning of the people. We open up these books and see what was done, not what we're going to write inside of here. So there's these 3 svarim that are Nitachim B'Rosh Hashanah. These 3 diaries, almost so to speak, that had been written in throughout the year, that were all the things that you did, they're open in Rosh Hashanah. Echad Shel Rosh Hashanah, one is from the totally wicked people. The Echad Shel Tzadikim, one is from the totally righteous people. The Echad Shel Beinim, one is from the intermediate people. Tzadikim Gemur, the totally righteous people, Nechtav Nechtam La'al L'chaim. They're written and they're sealed immediately for life. Rishon Gemur, totally wicked people, Nechtav Nechtam La'al L'misa. They're written and they're sealed immediately for death. Beinim, the intermediate people, Toluyim Ba'imdim, they're suspended and they're standing, hanging in the balance. Rishon by Yom Kippurim, from Rishon to Yom Kippurim. Zachu, if they merit, meaning in the Sersmi Tshuva, Nechtav L'chaim, then they're written for life. Lo Zachu, if they don't merit, and Nechtav L'misa, then they're written for death. Which Taisus points out that it says from the fact that it says Beinim, that it sounds like the Tzadikim are someone who has a majority of schuyas, and Rishon are the ones that have majority of sins, and the Beinim are the ones that are Mechza. But Taisus does point out that sometimes we'll have tzaddikim that are nechtam l'misa, and some Rishon Gemurim that will be l'chaim because Hashem wants to pay up the little bit of good for them and pay up the little bit of bad for them. But they will die and they will live, but sometimes happens. He says that Taisus says because it's a machlik Rishon. Taisus says it's l'chayim mabo. What we're discussing over here by Rishon it's misa, tzaddikim is chayim. What it means l'chayim mabo means for the world to come. And again, that also answers why we see sometimes wicked are living and tzaddikim are dying. Because it would be it's a judgment for the world to come that's immediate. Is it l'chaim or l'misa? Now, Amr Bavin, he says,
don't get a chance to do tshuva.
What?
Don't get a chance to do tshuva.
Right, Rishon Gemur. That's the way exactly. That's what it sounds like that Rishon Gemur would be immediately dead. Again, but the shaila is, what are we talking about over here? Is it l'chayim maba, or is it when is this also? There's I mean, what I'm saying, we say you could always be currying gizar din shel adam. Yafet stalk alaylam. But the concept of says tshuva is only for beinim. It's not for tzaddikim. It's not for tzaddikim. Now Amar Rav, he said, Micro, what's the pasuk which the whole says tshuva is a chiddush. And I'm saying you have the din. But beinim atluyim ba'imdim. They have the assessment tshuva. They could do tshuva before Rosh Hashanah, but not after Rosh Hashanah. What's the pasuk? The pasuk in Tehillim says David HaMelech talks about his enemies. He says Yimachu meSefer Chaim. He says they should be erased from the book of life. V'im tzadikim like Keseva, they shouldn't be written with the righteous. So the terminologies are broken down to show there's 3 different svarim that I mentioned. And David HaMelech was saying, which the first talk about why doesn't he want them in the book of Rishon? He says I don't want them to be written in any one of these books. What are these books? So Yimachu meSefer, when it says they should be erased from the book, it's a Sefer Shel Rishon Gemur. That's the book of the totally wicked. When it says Chaim, life, it's a Sefer Shel Tzadikim. That's the book of the righteous. And when it says Tzadikim like Keseva, with the righteous, they shouldn't be written. The first one was to explain why is this referring to this one, but it says Sefer Shel Beinim, that's referring to the book of the Beinim. I think maybe because Im Tzadikim, they're the ones with the righteous, but it sounds like Im Tzadikim, it sounds like the Beinim are being called Tzadikim, and I Keseva should not write them. But come on, that's a source for one shot of the way we see the 3 svarim. Another source of Nachman Yitzchak Mahachis is a pasuk in Shemais. Says Vim Ayin, and if not, says Moshe Rabbeinu, Machein the Mesifracha sheketzav to erase me from the sefer that you wrote, which if you don't forgive the Jewish people. So says the Gemara, Machein, erase me, please. That's Sefer Shel Rishon. That's the book of the wicked. Mesifracha from your book says Sefer Shel Tzadikim. This book of the righteous. Asheketzav that you wrote. There's Sefer Shel Beinim. That's the book of the intermediate people. Again, alluding to this idea that there are 3 svarim that are the Ptachin that a judge that recall the actions of the Tzadikim Gemurim, the Rishon Gemurim, and the Beinim which are Tlim Ba'imdim from Rosh Hashanah Daf, then get to any time.